to what I was just talking about as being conceptual or symbolic of reality. If you buy into the reality that it is all one big system, one big energy, and that you're part of that, then the universe really is aware of itself through you, through your senses. This whole system of energy can be aware of itself. But then Alan would point out that the part doing the awareness can't be really aware of itself. In the same way that you can't bite your own teeth or see your own eyes. And he would point out that if you try to look at yourself, try to look at your own head, for instance, all you see is blank. And this takes it back to that nothingness I was talking about. There is this nothingness, and this nothingness is kind of where this awareness comes out of. It's a difficult idea to get your mind around. But if you spend a little bit of time trying to look at your own head and noticing what that looks like, you find that there is this nothingness that everything comes out of. And this actually applies to a lot of different parts of life. If you start thinking about the idea of death, for instance, which is one of the big boogeymen of human beings, if you start thinking about death, Alan Watts would say, so what's it going to be like to die? I mean, what's it going to be like to go to sleep and never wake up? And, he mentioned that this gives a lot of people the creeps. But then he would say, well, what was it like before you were born? If you go back and try to remember what it was like before you were born, you finally get to a place where there's just nothing. And then he points out that, well, when you're gone, it's going to be just like that. There's just going to be nothing. And no one to regret it. And the energy that you're a part of, the whirlpool of life that you're a part of, you're still a part of that. It's just the brain that you have that's becoming aware of the universe, that God is becoming aware of the universe through that brain. When that brain is gone, that awareness will disappear, but it will come again in another child, in another baby, in another insect, in another worm. He would often point out that every worm, every insect, every cat, every dog sees itself as being the center of it all. And it is. You're the center of it all, and every snail is the center of it all too. And through all of that, the universe in many, many different ways is aware of itself. Another related idea he would talk about is the idea of the universe playing hide and seek with itself. In fact, he had a wonderful analogy about that. He would say, what if you could dream any dream at night? When you went to sleep at night, you could dream any length of time, and you could dream an entire lifetime. What would you do? And he pointed out that, well, at first you would probably dream the most wonderful things you could think of: the best food, the best sex, the greatest riches, the most luxury, having the most fun, the most sensory pleasures. All the things that you've always wanted to do. But after a while, you would probably get tired of that. You'd say, well, I've done this enough, and there's nothing exciting about it anymore. So you'd begin to add a little adventure into it. You'd begin to take some chances. You'd climb mountains. You'd leap over the Snake River Canyon in your motorcycle. You would do some things that brought a little pizzazz into things. You'd add a little element of danger. And then you might decide that when you went to sleep at night, not only would you dream these dangerous things, but you would forget that you were dreaming, so that when you woke up, you could go, oh, wow, wasn't that amazing? And you would just keep pushing the envelope on this until you were exploring what it was like to get into intense suffering and then finally wake up. And then he would point out that, well, what if that's what you're doing right now? he would liken this back to a whole explanation of why are we here and what it's all about. This one energy that makes up everything can just rest in being everything, knowing everything forever. But after a while, being everything and knowing everything can get boring. So the universe others itself. It plays hide and seek with itself. It manifests itself as people and animals and plants and everything else in a way where these parts of that energy don't realize that they're the one energy. They are thinking that they're separate. It's like being asleep and having these crazy dreams just for the fun of it. And then at a certain time, that energy again wakes up to who it is. And that this cycles over and over and over and over. And the Hindus have believed this for many, many thousands of years, and so have the Buddhists. So again, this is this whole idea of on and off, of God knowing who he is, and then playing hide and seek with itself and forgetting. And so in order to have remembering, you kind of have to have forgettery. Because remembering everything all the time gets to be quite a burden. And sometimes it's good to forget, and then it's time to remember. A lot of us that are in the spiritual movement, you know, we've learned that it's not good to be attached to things. And so we work on meditating and being unattached and getting into these high spiritual states where we feel at one with the universe and so on. And Alan Watts points out that that is one side of one of these on-off polarities also. He received a letter one time from a very famous Buddhist teacher who said, "Dear Alan, how are you doing? As for me, I'm fine, but I'm in the process now of becoming attached to as many things as possible. And I've given up all thoughts of enlightenment and satori for the time being." And really what he was pointing out that there is this flow back and forth, this sort of on-off movement between unity and feeling at one with everything. And then, on the other hand, it's fun to become attached to things sometimes. It's fun to go into your conceptual map of who you are and play around in there. And to be just spiritual all the time becomes very dry. And if you've known people who are extra spiritual all the time, they are very dry and brittle in a way. And so there's this flow back and forth between being attached and being unattached. And when, spiritual people too play this game of black and white, where white must win. When they decide that they're going to make being spiritual as opposed to being worldly, they make the being spiritual white, and they say that being worldly is black, and that one has to win out over the other. So, be careful about this, because everything that's going on is all part of this one big cosmic drama, and it's all happening in exactly the way that it needs to happen. And Alan Watts just liked to point this out. He was, he really could not take very much of this stuff very seriously. Another really fascinating topic that Alan Watts talks about a lot is the idea of God, and how in the West in particular we tend to see God as the ruler of the universe. We have these images of God sitting on a throne. And he points out that this comes from kind of the ancient Egyptian and Chaldean ideas of emperors and conquerors, and that we see God as kind of the ruler of the universe. And this puts the people in the West